the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you are answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Tom Lewis. So Tom is an engineer, environmental specialist, emergency manager, business executive, consultant, and board director with over 35 years of professional experience, 5 years in the government sector, and then over 30 years in the private sector. He is the lead author of a book titled Future Ready, Your Organization's Guide to Rethinking Climate Resilience and Sustainability. Tom has also served and continues to serve on a variety of nonprofit boards, advisory boards, and associated committees, including but not limited to the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure and the Climate Adaptation Center. So Tom is a PE in New York and New Jersey and has BS and MS degrees in civil engineering from the University of Connecticut. He got his JD degree from Rutgers Law School. So today, Tom will talk about climate adaptation versus climate mitigation. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everybody. Let's see. Page down, see if that's working. There we go. I was actually here one time before, back in 2022. And at that time, I was still with WSP after serving the first part of my career in government, Connecticut DOT, then short time with Dewberry, and then at Lewis Berger for almost 30 years, which was then acquired by WSP. And through that time, I accumulated a lot of good experience in infrastructure engineering, but also environmental services. And through the environmental services where I got involved in emergency management. I got involved in emergency management, and then that led to getting involved in resilience. At the same time, the environmental path I was on took me into the sustainability world. And I basically obtained a passion for both sustainability and climate resilience, and climate mitigation, of course, being very closely aligned in most people's minds with sustainability. And when I presented here in 2022, I had just been asked by WSP after Lewis Berger was acquired by WSP to pull together the sustainability part of the business with the emergency management part of the business that I was already leading. It came in with me from Lewis Berger, and then a smaller resilience practice that already existed in WSP, and really trying to raise the resilience practice to the same level as sustainability, which was the biggest part of the business at the time, because we saw the synergies. We saw that really resilience, very closely aligned with climate adaptation, and sustainability very closely aligned with climate mitigation. The two ideally are done together and done in parallel so that you're moving both along in parallel. And that's very relevant to the topic here today that I wanted to talk about, which is climate mitigation versus climate adaptation. And as was mentioned, at the very end of my time at WSP, I was the lead author on a book that actually got published a little after the last time I spoke here. It was published in May of 2023, And it was all about climate resilience and sustainability together, and how whatever type of organization you're from, whether it be government or it be a nonprofit or it be private sector, how you can build this kind of mindset into your organization in a more effective and efficient way. So again, really is very relevant to the topic today, and builds on what I spoke about last time, was this idea of bringing it all together at WSP, where I was at the time. So now here we are in 2025. I'm now with CSA Group, which is a Hispanic-owned engineering company, the largest one in Puerto Rico, but also working in the mainland up and down the East Coast. And it is the largest Hispanic-owned consulting engineering company in the United States. And I'm here once again to help them kind of bring these things together for their business strategy. As well as help them with some corporate improvements and some mergers and acquisitions. And so very much this is a topic that we talk about in the business setting, that I wanted to come here today and talk to you all about, which is, now that we are here in 2025 with the current, economic uncertainties, some of the geopolitical changes that have occurred, would it be okay to focus on climate adaptation, at least for the time being, over climate mitigation? Or would that be a sustainability advocate's betrayal, as opposed to just being a smart thing to do? So I'll set the table for this provocation, and purposely build to the end where I'll pose a few questions that will lead us to hopefully a robust, open discussion. And I very much want you to be thinking about how you feel about this question, this provocation, so we can hear everybody's perspectives at the end. So part one, starting with the basics, just in case there's anyone out there who not fully sure about the differences and overlaps between climate mitigation and climate adaptation. So I'll establish the definitions. So climate mitigation, as I said, is more aligned with traditional sustainability. It's about protecting for the impacts of the environment on our planet, by actions that are taken by governments, business, people, so that we can reduce planet warming greenhouse gases. Or aligned with it is, can we use technologies or even trees or other natural remedies that would act as carbon sinks that can remove and sequester those greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, and thus reduce the amount of planet warming greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So that's climate mitigation. Climate adaptation is about the process of accepting that there are changes to the climate, and that we need to react to them, and hopefully react in a way that not only takes into account the current climate, which has definitely gotten warmer and had more extreme weather, and has seas that are rising, but also the anticipated future changes, which that's the harder part. But if you're truly going to be climate adaptative, you need to also think about the future. And you especially need to look at those individuals and communities that are the most vulnerable to these global warming impacts. And of these two, climate adaptation is the one that historically over the last 20, 25 years has really needed the business case to be made more than climate mitigation. Climate mitigation picked up a lot of momentum since the 90s, and definitely in the last 20 years. And then the Paris Accords really injected a lot of support for climate mitigation, and setting greenhouse gas reduction goals that lead to keeping global temperature below, preferably 1.5 degrees C increase, but no more than 2 degrees C increase. And we've rarely talked about climate adaptation, oftentimes because the climate purists, the climate activists, I go to a lot of conferences internationally and nationally, they would say, well, why would we talk about climate adaptation? Because that means you're giving up on trying to keep the planet from warming. And we need to put all our focus, all our passions, all our funding into mitigating global warming, and not giving up and focusing on climate adaptation. So now I'll go into setting the stage using scientific data for where we are today and what the trends are pointing to in the future. Sure, many of you have seen some of these graphics before, maybe not the exact ones I'll use, but they should all sound pretty familiar to you. But first start with, yeah, the temperature, the air temperature globally, and how it has constantly continued to increase over the past really century, but especially so in the last few decades. It is an accelerating rate of increase, as you can see. But as you can also see, yeah, temperatures go up and down. Any given year, any given month, you can have swings in either direction towards warming or towards cooling. But the the global mean average, it's just, there's no way to argue with the fact that it has increased and that the rate of increase has accelerated. Now, people may want to try to argue whether fossil fuel is the cause of it. For purposes of this discussion, actually, that's the secondary issue, actually, is well, but if it's happening, well, then you still need to adapt to it regardless of what the cause is, right? So this is the trend in the global air temperature. And then the note at the bottom says, warmer air can hold more moisture. Warmer air also can give more energy to weather fronts and extreme weather conditions. It also can lead to glacial ice melt, and not only can, but is leading to that, as well as more extreme weather. So what are the other impacts of global warming? Well, actually, as the note at the bottom of the left says, heat is actually, if you talk about human human deaths, heat is actually the biggest climate-related killer by a lot, actually. And as this chart shows, before climate change, you would rarely ever have 5-day heat wave conditions in the Southwest U.S., Mexico, northern Latin America. And then you can see as the plots get more and more dense with dots, basically now we're in a place where these events are happening fairly frequently, and in the future, based on the extrapolated heat trends, it'll be almost every week, every few times a month, kind of an occurrence, making certain locations very difficult to inhabit, certainly for anything other than indoor activities. So this next plot talks about the ocean. Much like the air, the ocean can grab and just hold on to heat. In fact, it does it more permanently, albeit more slowly than the air does. And there's a lag effect. But once the oceans heat up, it gains momentum in a way very different than air temperature rises. It pretty much can only move in that one direction. Once it starts going and picks up the kind of momentum it has picked up in the last few decades. And much like air being fuel for extreme weather, in the case of hurricanes and typhoons in particular, warm ocean temperatures is like rocket fuel to a hurricane or a typhoon. That's what it feeds on. That's how it picks up its energy and then transfers it in a cyclonic motion up into the upper atmosphere, and then creates the extreme weather. This is something that, again, is inarguable, the trend, whether you want to argue about the cause or not. An inarguable trend, and it's causing, a disparate amount of warming in areas that we care about here in the United States, Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, the Atlantic Gulf Stream, and the Pacific Kuroshio Current, all have impacts. The Pacific, of course, impacting Hawaii and the Pacific territories, as well as even Alaska, actually, indirectly. These are areas that are most impacted by ocean warming, and they impact pretty much all three sides of the the coastline of the United States, including the Gulf coastline, as well as Atlantic and Pacific. Now, the sea level, of course, is also rising while the temperatures are rising, and that is also at a rate that is increasing rapidly. And this is, of course, as water warms, it expands thermally, which that gives significant sea level rise in and of itself, even if no ice was melting. But then the melting of the glacial ice between the warming oceans combined with the warming air temperatures, they both separately, but synergistically contribute to glacial ice melting, which is basically in the northern hemisphere is the Greenland landmass of ice, glacial ice, and in the southern hemisphere is the Antarctic glacial landmass of ice, are melting, and that melt rate is rapidly accelerating. And at the end of the day, literally the bottom line of this is more damage. Damage from extreme weather that is exacerbated by warmer air that makes for more extreme weather, warmer oceans, which is that rocket fuel for hurricanes and typhoons, also for wildfires, the extreme heat and droughts, and then of course heat waves. And all of it, as you can see by the plot as you go from left to right, unmistakable, inarguable, increase and accelerating rate of increase over the last couple decades. And there is one other factor that's contributing to the increased costs of these disasters and extreme weather events, and that is the fact that at the same time this is happening in a bad way with global warming, we've also had a demographic shift where more people are living in cities, which tend to be closer to the coast or to rivers that are more prone to flooding and to extreme weather in the case of the coastal cities that are exposed to hurricanes and typhoons. So it's literally a compounding negative effect that is leading to a very large and rapid increase of storm damage, storm-related damage that is having great economic impact both in the US and globally. And it's starting to even cause climate migration. So in terms of this stage setting, I'll finish with this quote from a very recent article in Forbes. It was the title of the article was "The Business Case for Climate Adaptation," and basically it's saying that climate change is too large and fast moving to sit back and just rely on climate mitigation strategies. The costs are just too extreme, and the global climate finance available is not keeping up with the need for climate adaptation. So he calls this, the adaptation imperative and conundrum, where we need to rapidly increase the investment, yes, into lowering greenhouse gas emission technologies, but also into climate adaptation as temperatures are rising, because we've already locked in enough change that the impacts are happening. Even if we didn't have any more increase in greenhouse gases, we've already locked in a changed climate enough that the extreme weather is here, the impacts are here, and adaptation is an imperative, as he says. So now the provocation, and hopefully definitely looking for everyone to participate and share your thoughts. So these are kind of a cascading set of questions. First one, which is more sustainable? Climate mitigation or climate adaptation? And when you think about that, think about, well, if you can avoid a structure being damaged, or you can avoid a population being impacted because you've either gotten them out of harm's way or you've elevated them in their buildings, their homes. Is that more, even if you're not using green materials necessarily, is that more green actually than building a green structure that is in harm's way and may get completely ruined the next time a storm comes because it's too low lying or it's in a vulnerable coastal area. The next question is the answer to this first question time dependent, meaning if you take into account other factors, not just the global warming and all the things I talked about with the scientific data, but also economic conditions, political conditions. Could your answer be different now than it was 2 or 3 years ago when the Biden administration and Congress passed the IRA and all the funding that was available for both mitigation and adaptation and resilience, versus now when the trend is in the other direction and there'll be less and less funding to go around. Third question, realistically, in the current economic climate, is there a way to properly fund and finance both climate mitigation and climate adaptation? This is just being practical. What do we think? Is there a way, even with political will and lots of community support, to do both? And lastly, maybe the more potentially controversial part, but one we have to confront, which is should geopolitical challenges such as the Trump administration's unsupportive posture with regard to climate mitigation, sustainability, green, renewables, etc., should that be an important factor in what we choose to focus on right now with regard to this question of climate mitigation versus climate adaptation?
Cool. So like, I think that